listening to an El Seminario production, a multi-generational, family-owned media company, capturing conversation that reflects our communities since 1989. Whether we answer your questions or inspire new ones, at El Seminario, we speak your language. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to We Speak Your Language, where real stories inspire real conversations. I am your host, Vivian Reyes, and today we are honored to welcome Katt Lovejoy, an inspiring community leader, passionate advocate, and ally to our migrant communities. It is a pleasure to have you here, Katt. To get us started, could you please tell me a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you for that very kind introduction. I work at Denver Children's Advocacy Center, and we support kids who've been through trauma, mainly abuse and neglect. But we investigate cases of abuse and neglect in Denver County, but we also offer therapy to kids who've been through other types of trauma, such as witnessing a crime, domestic violence, and then we have a program where we work with kids who've been through immigration trauma, which offers them therapy at no cost to the family to help overcome some of what being an immigrant in the United States looks like today. And so that's kind of what our organization does. This is what I do. I bring our resources to the community, talk about it in ways that are meaningful based on feedback from the community, and then try and bring those same resources to our kiddos as well, because healing is a whole child endeavor for sure.
That's a critical role, especially, it's always been, but especially now in these moments.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Let's go back a little. I understand you worked as a first grade teacher in Nava, Mexico. I'm curious, how did that journey begin for you?
Yeah, thanks. I love talking about my time in Nava. So thanks for asking. I worked there as a teacher, a first grade teacher, right out of college. And it was, I did my student teaching there, and it was very formative, not only in learning how to teach and also how not to teach, but also learning about culture and language and being the type of adult that I want kids, especially immigrant kids, to see, so that they know their value and they're welcome here. And so even though I'm not teaching anymore, that's transferred into my role now as really honoring that culture and what I learned, and being able to bring that into my relationships and interactions with the community now.
How did that opportunity present itself?
I volunteered with an organization that the summer after I graduated college, and they bought this school, the private school, for $1 and needed teachers. So because I was going back to school to get my teaching license, they invited me to come and teach there. And so in 3 weeks, I came back here, took a few classes, and moved to Mexico and taught for a year.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, it was
How long
de
were you
volada,
there?
as they say.
Yeah. How long were you there since you came here?
I was there for a year, from July through July, but I go back every year and visit friends and family.
So you have a lot of kiddos. You have kiddos in Mexico and you have kiddos here. Look
Yeah.
at you.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So given the current challenges, legal, political, and economic, what have you been seeing or hearing from our migrant communities lately?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is it's important to recognize that these challenges that I am about to name are not new. And I don't say that to minimize the difficulties, the highly problematic things that are happening for immigrants in our country right now, but I do say it because it's important for the community to know, especially the non-immigrant community, that these are things that immigrants have faced forever, for a very long time. And so these challenges to me come down to 3 areas. First challenge is just a mental well-being area in general. A lot of people are not aware of the mental charge or load that a lot of immigrants are carrying. There's a load that comes from the country they left behind, whether that was a good experience or not. Maybe there was trauma there, maybe there was poverty there, or maybe it's all good memories from the country they left behind. They're carrying that with them on a daily basis. Then you have the journey here. What was it like to get here? Maybe that was a traumatic experience, having to walk across borders. Maybe it wasn't. Either way, they had experiences that may have affected what their perception of being here now is. And then once an immigrant is here, even if they're a first generation kiddo that grew up here, just living in a country that has systems that do not honor the immigrant, that's going to be another mental health load as well, in terms of people having to reapply for status, having to pay for applications, changes in immigration policy in general. Then we have to talk about culture, fitting into the culture, learning the language, or being in a family where you don't identify as much with your culture, but you identify more with the culture you live with. And so to me, that I always start with the mental well-being piece of challenges, because we don't talk about it enough. It's unseen. But all those things I just named are, you can tell, are already a heavier load for someone who's an immigrant versus someone who's not. The other piece I think that's always been an issue is access. There's a sociologist, Cecilia Menjivar, who did a lot of studies with immigrants in the LA area and other areas. And she uses a term called liminal legality, which is really helpful for me, because basically it's saying your status as legal is liminal. It's limited. It's not complete, right? And what she meant was, no matter what someone's status is, whether that be undocumented or they have TPS or they have refugee status, the access to resources is limited, regardless of what kind of immigrant you are, whether that's health care resources, whether that's a well-paying job resources, whether that's the use of your education from another country to get a job that really matches what you're able to do. Or let's even just talk about higher education, right? Those are limitations for someone who's an immigrant. And you can even talk about childcare access or SNAP or public charge. So the lack of access or the limited access, I think, is something that immigrants have had to overcome forever. In that they don't get things that what someone as a citizen would say, this is a need, this is something that I'm owed. And that's a really big barrier and challenge for them. And then the last one, I think everyone's seeing it right now, but again, it's not new. Fear and confusion. Even before, the current administration, I would hear fears from the community around things like, what are you going to do with my data? Like, how are you protecting my address? How are you sharing my name? We have fears around public charge. Again, been a thing for a long time. If I go to the doctor in a few years' time, is that going to affect my ability to become a citizen or to have documents? What if immigration is at my kid's school? What if I get pulled over at a traffic stop, right? Even questions around, what if I have a diagnosis of depression? Does that mean they're going to take my kids away? These are fears that are built into the immigrant experience, either from misinformation or from purposeful confusion and causing fear. That is a huge barrier, not just to access, right, as we've talked about, but also mental well-being. The feeling of belonging for immigrants is lacking, because they don't feel like these things are for them, or they have a heavier charge or a heavier load to carry. So it all kind of comes together there. And what we're seeing now is just all the same things, just at a very heightened, heavier amount, I would say.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely true how you said, like, none of this is new. I think it's just for many people, it might be new news to them, but for
Right.
our migrant communities, it's something that we've continued to live for forever, for generations and for years, I love how you touched on different, like, areas in this response. I'm curious, you work with children, and I know you work with older adults too. Have you seen specific needs or concerns arise with each population?
Yeah, for sure. I think the first concern for me, especially moving into the next few years, is the access. Again, I think as we come across, for youth or for older adults, some limitations are continuing to remove access to things like healthcare or SNAP. Those are concerning from a family standpoint, or a child standpoint, or an older adult standpoint. which I think really means that we as organizations supporting those people have to do the legwork of finding resources that are safe and accurate, that we can help support the immigrant community. But the other thing I'd say, and to me, I work in a mental health institution, so this is the most important thing, and it's support. I think what we know about toxic stress, trauma, even tolerable stress is that when someone has a support system that can move that stress from toxic to tolerable or even to positive. And so when I think about youth, what I see with youth is they're walking through a hard time, whether it's because they're seeing things on social media or because their family's walking through fear. Maybe they have to go to the grocery store for their parents at this point, right? Like they have to be the adult. And what we're seeing and what we know is that if those kids have an adult, whether it's a parent, a teacher, a therapist, a coach, who's able to offer emotional support, which mostly means listening well, responding and naming what you hear, and then while we can't, most of the time we can't fix the problem, right? But we can come alongside them and walk with them and tell them we're here to support the best we can. To me, that's the biggest need for youth right now on the spectrum of whatever challenge they may be experiencing. And then when I was thinking about this question for older adults, I did a training a couple of years ago where I asked older adults to write down on sticky notes stressors from one being an immigrant, one their age, and then any other stressor in their lives. And I wrote some of them down, and I'll share them vaguely because I don't want to share personal information, right? But one of those stressors was discrimination. So an older adult saying one of the stressors in my life is discrimination. Another said access to being able to visit my kids because of my documentation status, right? Which is an immigration thing. And another said the sickness of my wife, right? So these are very intersecting ideas of my age, just the cultural world in which I live in, and my immigration are things that are really affecting older adults right now. And then you add on top of that isolation, and not being able to get around as much or drive as well or not having resources. So my answer for that is the same. Accompaniment, support, how can we come alongside the older adults in our lives, and really just be a listening point to talk more around what are you feeling, I hear you and I value you, I think it feels simple, right? But to me, those feel like the biggest needs that I'm seeing right now.
And I don't know why, too, your response me acordó, it reminded me of, when their family members die back home, they're not able to say goodbye. They're not able to have that closing moment. And honestly, I don't think that's talked about a lot or at all. It's hard to talk about one, but I think it's important to bring in mind too that as human beings, we go through these things too, but we're not allowed to have closure like others,
Yeah. Speaking of that access again, of not being able to freely travel back to visit or to say goodbye to someone. Yeah, that's huge. Yeah.
With everything you've mentioned so far, how have you seen or how do you see resilience show up in the lives of those you work with?
Yeah, awesome question. I will firstly say that I struggle with the word resilience because the amount of resilience that an immigrant has to have to live in this system is not fair. It's not, and sometimes I feel like when we say resilience, well, now we're putting it back on the immigrant. They have to be resilient versus let's fix the system. That does not mean that I don't see resilience, right? And the definition for me of resilience is overcoming hard things, and that's my favorite part of this job of connecting with immigrants who have gone through a hard situation or are going through a hard situation and have used that experience to uplift other immigrants. I mean, DACA recipients who learn how to tell their story in a way that uplift other DACA recipients that now have an organization to teach kids to talk about their story, right? Or DACA recipients who work in the university space to help kids get access or other students get access to higher education, or promotoras who've walked through food scarcity that now teach people how to grow their own food. Business owners who use their giftings now to uplift not just other immigrants, but culture and language. To me, it's not a requirement. You don't have to be an immigrant and start your own organization, right? and everyone does it in a different way, but to me it's the sign of resilience in the immigrant community is that they're using what was hard to uplift themselves and others. And that's my favorite part of getting to work in the immigrant community.
I definitely get what you shared about the term resilience, because I was back and forth for so long. I mean, like, well, if things weren't this way, we wouldn't have to be resilient. We could just, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So I definitely entiendo. I understand with what you mean with the term resilient.
yeah.
It's
Immigrants are very resilient, and that doesn't mean we shouldn't make the system a little better, right?
yeah. Um, you've dedicated years to advancing equity and justice through community-centered efforts. What continues to drive and inspire your work?
I think the community is the biggest piece of that. We've already talked about how support and relationships can move stress from toxic or tolerable to positive. And I think being able to be in community, get to know organizations and make friends and work alongside people who I know stand for the same things or are fighting for the same things, that gets me through on a daily basis for sure. The other piece that maybe I've realized through a lot of therapy is uh, just taking the little wins. I mean, that when I have someone come into my office and I'm able to hold space for someone who's stressed out or feels seen after their trauma, or when a kid talks for the first time in a group, or we get a car seat for a family, right? Like those little wins are reminders to me of that what we're doing is actually working, even if it's just for one person at a time. And that helps me continue to get up every day and keep doing what I do.
Mm-hmm. Is there a story or moment that left a lasting impression on you?
Oh my gosh, so many. The one that comes up the most, if we're talking about my work, is when I walk into the community. Let's say it's at a tabling event or a training, and a family will come up to us and say, "My kid went through some trauma and did therapy with you, and with DC, not me, I'm not a therapist, with DCAC, and um, it changed. It didn't just change my kiddo's life; it changed our whole family's life." I think that doesn't happen often, and that's because it's hard to talk about trauma, and it's you don't always know if it's a safe place. But when I hear from the mouth of the community that what we're doing really has changed lives, when we're talking about things like immigration trauma or sexual abuse, that's when I know that I'm where I want to be. I know it's kind of a vague answer to your question, but that's a big one.
No, definitely, because I mean, the work you're doing is definitely challenging, you know? Sometimes
Yeah.
we might feel like we're not doing enough, but then it's the people we serve that remind us that one little thing we did like impact them so much in a good way. And so just I think it's important to remember that too. You know, you're doing everything you can, and the world can feel heavy very often and more than we would like to. But I think I love how you continue to use the term community, because I feel like
Mhm.
how I've heard you say it a lot, and it takes a village, you know, and it's going to take a village, and it's that same village that continues to remember or remind us that we're gonna get through this together, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I had a friend say in uh January that we were going to walk through some hard times, but we're also going to see community really stand up and support each other. And that was a good reminder again to me of like things are hard, but we still have each other. So I think that's really important.
And comunidad and community.
Yep. Yep.
How would you define true allyship? And in what ways can non-immigrant allies show up in meaningful and supportive ways?
Yep. Um, well, firstly, I can only answer that second part of that question since I am a non-immigrant. But for me, allyship comes down to empathy and respect. I think it's it's so easy to want to make change in the world, especially as someone who doesn't have a lived experience, but not listen well or not respect well or not even understand that what I think might not be correct about the experience of this other person. And then we get into the weeds of like, you're really just trying to save me. You're not out being an ally. And so to me, it comes down to number one, if I'm not an immigrant, the first thing I have to do is listen and learn from the experience. And I have to come into a space where I'm listening and learning, not like I'm here to help, I'm here to make change, but more like you're the expert, you know what you need, and I want you to teach me, right? And that works when we're talking about what you need, but it also works when we're talking about what your experience is and how you overcome these things. And then I'm becoming an ally who's not just trying to help, but I'm actually learning and seeing and growing from my relationship with this person. So to me, I think it has to start with empathy and respect. And then I do think action's important. I think I've heard from a lot of my friends of color or immigrant friends that they do need people who don't have lived experiences to speak out about these things. And that could mean obviously things like voting or marching or posting on social media. For me, the most powerful way to be an ally and speak up about these things is in those relationships with people who don't understand what the immigrant experience is. And when they say something that's maybe a little problematic or very problematic, it doesn't cost me much to say, hey, this is why that's problematic, or hey, this is what my friends who are immigrants are experiencing. It costs an immigrant a lot, right? To have to do that or to have done it for so long. And so yes, voting, yes, social media, right? Yes, marches, but where are we really helping people who don't understand better what this experience is like? And we cannot do that if we don't first listen and hold respect for the people in our lives who are immigrants. So that's kind of what I've learned about allyship.
Yeah, it's like I know, like we both know, like I'm not asking you to save us or save me specifically. Like
Yeah,
can I talk to you about how I feel? Can I share with you what's going on? Sometimes as human beings in general, we just want to be heard, someone
yeah,
to cry on, a shoulder. Um, that doesn't mean we're requesting or asking something specifically of you. So I
right.
love, well said. Thank you for that
Mhm.
response. I really, truly love that. What are your hopes for migrant communities in the next 5 to 10 years?
Um, Thank you for this question because I feel like it's so, everyone, most people who are listening to this know that it's so easy to just be like, see where we are and put your head down and try and get through it and not think about, well, what do we want to get out of this? Or what are my hopes and dreams for the next 5 to 10 years? So thank you for making me think about that. I think when I was thinking about this, my biggest hope is for non-immigrants. I think it's for people who've been gifted a status or citizenship in this country to get to know immigrants, get to know them, not as an economic contributor, not as someone who's coming to take something that's not theirs, but as someone who has an identity and experience, a culture, and expertise that really like enriches our world, whether that be starting their own business or teaching me something new or being my friend, right? And so I think to me that's what I hope for. I want to see other people understanding and honoring that. And then of course I would love that as people do that, that our immigration policy can start to actually honor those unique identities of people in our country. But I think for me what's lacking is that people don't see immigrants as the value they are yet, if that makes sense.
No, it definitely does. Like we're numbers, we're dollar signs, we're anything else but human beings. You know,
Right.
the
Yeah.
way we're treated, the way we're just in so many, we're a number to so many systems, to benefiting systems. And but we tend to forget that part, that we're humans and we deserve respect and dignity just like any other person. And I do hope that for the next 5 to 10 years, we start to internalize and realize that,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
and also within our own communities también. Hopefully this makes us stronger, and even within our own gente, I don't know, we're kinder to each other.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really
Um,
easy to see each other as deficits instead of as fortalezas, as strengths, right? Like you don't have as much money. Well, that's hard. I'll help you with that. Versus what do you have because you've had to live in a world where you didn't have everything given to you? Like how is that a strength? Or even when we think about Spanish speakers and bilingualism, a lot of times that's presented as, well, English is their second language versus they speak 2 or 3 languages, right? And so I think that mind shift is so big of you have a lot to teach me because of these things, not, well, you need more from me because you're an immigrant, for example.
what do you mean by that?
So I think a lot of times the way, and this might be a way that white people or non-immigrants are trying to help, but it's actually problematic, are seeing people as needing more
Ah,
because their experience is different versus they actually have knowledge, expertise that I don't have because of their experience, whether that's cultural or linguistic, or it's because they aren't given what I've been given and they know how to overcome that. Does that make sense? So instead of seeing it as a deficit or as you need extra help, it's more like, no, actually, you have done way more with your life than I ever have had to. How can I like learn from that? And how is that a strength versus a not enough or a gap in what you can offer? Does that make sense?
now it does. Thank you for
Okay, yeah,
explaining that to me. I think
sure.
that is a perfect example of like if only you listened, if only you gave the
Mm,
opportunity um, to give us the opportunity to be heard, you know?
oh, me too.
Pero sí, siento que that could be like a way that everybody could plant their granito de arena, you know?
Mm,
Um, so I would encourage everyone and anyone listening to start there. And I think it, like how you said, it se escucha, it sounds like something small, but listening can go a long way.
yeah,
You will, and you will learn a lot more from a person if you actively listen to them.
right. Yeah,
To
totally.
conclude our conversation, if someone from a migrant family of any age were listening right now, what message would you want to share with them?
I think personally, well, this is all personal, let's be honest. I think personally, my first message or the first thing I'd say is that I'm sorry that immigrants have to live in a system and an experience that underestimates who they are and doesn't see them as valuable. The second thing I would say is that I'm grateful for the ways that I have gotten to know so many immigrants through my work or through my friendships, and it's hard to say how, but they've just enriched who I am and my life and just getting to live in this community in Denver. I'd also say, and maybe we don't say it enough. I think we don't say it enough to immigrants. We say it enough to other people. It's okay not to be okay. I think a lot of what we just named of like the mental well-being pressures, the access to resources pressures, the fear. If someone's not struggling, I mean, it makes sense that someone would be struggling with all of that right now, and it's okay to validate that and say this is really hard. Um, and I think there's a lot of this rhetoric around pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, which is a very United States thing to say, right? And immigrants are already doing that. It's okay to take a step back and be like, of course I'm stressed out. That why wouldn't I be, right? And so to me, that's an important message to share. And then the last thing is just that we at DCAC and I as an individual are doing our best we can to try to walk alongside immigrants in a way that is meaningful and find other orgs that are doing that in the coming years. And that just feels hard. There's no guarantees there, but we are really trying to do that. Those are my three big things.
You know, I probably said this in the past, but I think it's how you said, we're always having to try to survive, or there's a lot of issues that we're going through, and we just hold it in, or we try to hold it in, and it's deemed and seen bad if like someone's trying to seek out mental health services.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
think that's very silly, and we better get better at that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Are
I
there
think
Go
I
ahead.
think for me the biggest piece there, that at least in not only in my own work, which is not an immigrant, but my own personal therapy and work, but also as I talk with immigrants around these things, is validation is so huge. Even before we get to the point of maybe I want to go to therapy, the being able to say to an immigrant, or an immigrant being able to say to themselves, like, oh, I'm stressed out, and that's not bad, that makes sense, right? Like that's the first step towards kind of walking, well, self grace towards yourself first of all, but then also walking through, like, okay, so now that I know it's not my fault, I don't need to feel shame for this. It's actually, now I know how to walk through it. So I think even if people aren't in the space to go to therapy yet, to me it's important that they hear that if an immigrant is struggling right now with any of the above, that makes complete sense, and that's okay. And the next steps will come from there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And like you mentioned earlier, it's okay to not be okay. There's so many
Yeah.
things being thrown at you right now. It's okay to not be okay. Like, how are you supposed to be okay with everything going on, you know?
Right.
So I think hopefully we gave a great reminder to those who are listening that it's okay to not be okay. And if you
Yeah.
don't want therapy, then there's other ways to take care of yourselves. You are not alone. If you want to be alone, go ahead, be alone. Treat yourself, go to the park, go for a walk, stretch, read a book, call it a day. Be a like I tell like I like to be just I want to be a couch potato for the rest of the day, and I'm emotionally not available today. You know,
Yep. Yep.
just self-care. Even if therapy is not your thing, there's other ways to take care of yourselves, and let's not feel guilty about that. Let's
Yeah.
not feel
Yeah.
guilty for wanting to do something for our self-care.
Yep. Totally.
Are there any last words you would like to share?
No, I mean, just thank you. Thanks for letting me be a part of this. And I do hope that it wasn't just me talking and it was helpful, but I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about what I've learned, but working in the community for a few years now.
Well, thank you so much, Kat. Not only for the vital work you do, but also for your unwavering allyship. De todo corazón te lo agradezco mucho. Thank you to Caring for Denver for making this project a reality, and thank you to everyone who is listening. This conversation continues with you. Let's keep breaking the ice together. Please take care of yourselves and look after one another. I am your host, Vivian Reyes. Until next time.